The Senate Committee on Natural Resources will now come to order. Secretary, will you please call roll?
Chair Cruz Crawford,
Here.
Senator Scheibel,
Here.
Senator Pizzina,
Present.
Senator Hansen,
Here.
Senator Ellison.
Present.
Thank you.
We have 5 committee members present. We have a quorum. I want to welcome our audience in Carson City. Former Senator Harris there, and those joining us by video conference in Las Vegas. Oh, sorry, vice versa. And those tuning in over the internet. Before I start, we're going to make several housekeeping announcements. When testifying, please turn the microphone on to speak and off to listen. We have listeners and viewers in Las Vegas and online. We're recording this meeting and it'll be available through the legislative website following our meeting. If you have any handouts for the committee, please provide 10 to our wonderful committee secretary prior to your testimony. In addition, exhibits and amendments must be submitted electronically or PDF as a PDF file, electronically as a PDF file to our committee manager no later than 3:30 p.m. the business day before the meeting. All the committee information is available on Nellis, which can be accessed through the legislature's website. You may also watch our meeting in through Nellis or on our YouTube channel. We ask that you make public comments at 2 minutes or less. Dittos are also appreciated. Written public comment may be submitted before, after, or after up to 24 hours at the adjournment of the meeting or during. Members of the public may provide testimony on a bill either in person or over the telephone. And finally, please mute your electronic devices, especially cell phones, during the meeting. Before we move to our first agenda item, I wanted to let you know that we will be taking our bills out of order today. So we'll be hearing our Senate Bill 235 first and then 215 second. Correct? And I do have one thing, Senator Hansen's very excited about his bill. I'm really excited for today's bill because it's going to be real fun. There's going to be a show and tell, and later you might be able to touch some objects. So,
Is that me?
So before we move to our first agenda item, I do have a committee BDR for introduction. Please remember, when you vote in favor of introducing a BDR, it does not imply the commitment to the support, the measure. Later, all this action does is allow the BDR to become a bill and enter the legislative hearing process. So this is BDR 49972, which revises provisions relating to governmental administration. The BDR is from the Sunset Subcommittee of the Legislative Commission. Do I have a motion to introduce BDR 49972?
So moved.
I have a motion from Senator Ellis and a second from Senator Scheibel to introduce BDR 49972. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those all opposed say nay. Okay, motion carries. We are ready.
All right.
We are ready for our next bill hearing. Once we have our bill presenter forward for 235.
It'll fit over here. I'm sitting offset here a little bit. Are you ready, Madam Chair?
Yes, I will now open the hearing on Senate Bill 235.
Thank you. Yeah, the bill, I'm Senator Ira Hansen, representing District 14, which includes most of geographical Washoe County, all of Pershing, Lander, Humboldt, and large sections of Eureka and Elko counties also. The bill today is actually a very interesting bill, 2 parts mainly. The first part, we're going to talk a little bit about constitutional rights. It's actually more like a judicial bill, so I got to go into that a little bit. The second part is more of the cool stuff, and she kind of stole my thunder, but we'll have a very interesting display here in a minute. To start with, this is a copy of some of the amendments of the United States Constitution. That is part of the Bill of Rights. Now, question, why do we have a Bill of Rights? Got to go back. We got to do a little bit of foundation here first. When our founding fathers brought in 1787 the Constitution, it was initially rejected by the American people. and they felt that it gave too much power to the central government. So in English history, in the 17th century, England had 2 civil wars. And in following the Civil War, they wrote in 1689, they came up with what is they call the Bill of Rights. Now, England's different than us. They have a constitution, but it's an unwritten constitution. The only part of their constitution that is written is the Bill of Rights. So when the Founding Fathers in 1787 presented what we call the Constitution, initially it was rejected, and then as a compromise, they added a Bill of Rights. And we literally, in a few of the amendments there, copied it verbatim from the English Bill of Rights. Our Constitution, no, why did they do that? A couple of things real quick. Because in England, they didn't have the protections that we do. What we call civil liberties and due process of law, they didn't enjoy. So when our Founding Fathers put in the Bill of Rights, they added the first 10 amendments, which we call the Bill of Rights. In those, 5 of them, though, have to do with basically protecting criminals, potential criminals, from the government. We call those specific things that you are allowed, you are protected under the Bill of Rights. People are always saying, I have constitutional rights. Well, this is some of the most critical ones. So if you look at number 4, Amendment 4, this is very important. And the reason it's important is we'll get into it in the actual bill here in just a minute. But I do want to lay a foundation for where we're coming from on this. You, as an American citizen, have the right of the people to be secure in your persons, houses, papers, and effect against unreasonable searches and seizures, and that shall not be violated. You have to have some level of probable cause. 4th Amendment. 5th Amendment, notice, very important, no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. And on the 6th Amendment, you'll notice you have a right, the accused has a right to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. So, the courts through the years. Courts, first of all, how does a court create a law? Well, go back again. In England, they had what was known as the common law. William Blackstone in 1770 wrote his famous Commentaries on the Laws of England. Now, if you want to learn a little quick history of Nevada, if you go to NRS Chapter 1, very first chapter, .030, you'll see that the common law of England is to be the rule in the courts in Nevada. And so when you have, and I'll talk about judicial laws here in a minute, we'll talk about a couple cases that are especially critical coming up. Now, one that is, you'll notice you have a right in your person, you have a reasonable right against unreasonable searches. The courts in Hibble versus the state, of Humboldt County, Nevada, which made it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, in that you have to, under the United States Supreme Court common law, you are required to provide identification to a law enforcement officer in certain cases. Now, right now, for those of you that are older, we used to have things called vagrancy laws. And vagrancy laws allowed law enforcement to basically stop and talk to you at any time about any issue. The court said that's not right. That was especially common. That was racial profiling, so it was stopped. Now, what does this all have to do with the law that we're talking about now? And by the way, I made a mistake. I did not introduce a very special guest. I should point out that this senator, a former senator, is Dallas Harris. Senator Harris, would you like to say hi real quick?
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking a breath, Senator Hansen. It's good to see you.
Well, I was trying to get it quick, Dallas. You know me, I can be a little windy. We sat next to each other on the floor.
Senator Harris, yes, we have started a timer, just FYI, so I'll let you know when it's almost close.
All right, well, don't
Your
worry, I'll
discretion,
get to
Madam
it.
Chair.
Real quick, you have protections under common law, which is essentially what you call case law or judge's law or precedent law, okay? So some of the stuff we talked about briefly. Now, let's go to section 2 of my bill. Start there. You'll notice there's a cross out. It's the language that we're keeping says each person is required to have a license, and then it says when a law enforcement officer comes up to you in the field, you not only have to show a license, but then the cross out it says any wildlife which the person may have in his or her possession, or any weapon, ammunition, device, or apparatus in his or her possession, which may be used for any activity related to this section. Now apply the 5th Amendment, okay? Let's say the law enforcement agent comes up to Ira Hansen in the field, and I have actually possibly broken the law. Under the 5th Amendment, I'm not required to prove my innocence. This is a very important point in our legal system. The state has to prove every single element of a crime. You never have to prove you're innocent. So when a law enforcement officer comes up to me and and let's assume that there's some reasonable suspicion, and that's why he has a right to come and ask me anything in the first place, under Nevada law right here, you are going to be required to turn over incriminating evidence potentially. Remember, the state cannot force you to show you're innocent. They have to prove every element of the crime. So what that strikeout does, look what it says, and this, by the way, was written in 1955. In 1966, we had the Miranda warnings. Everybody's familiar with the fact that the court has to, as required, law enforcement has to go, you have the right to remain silent, you have a right to an attorney, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Well, you'll notice in the statute that isn't required. This is a mandatory process. So this is a big deal. This actually is a significant violation of especially the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. You do not have to provide the state with any evidences of your activity that may incriminate you. And clearly this does. You could have, and they have a right in the current law, any weapon, ammunition, device, or apparatus in his or her possession which may be used for any activity. You have to show them your guns, your ammo, any game you might have, your pouches, and everything else. They can do a full field search of you, yet you don't have the, you have the protections of the United States Constitution to not incriminate yourself. The state has to prove every element of the crime. What happens, though, if you don't do this? Well, they have a law in Nevada. They call it hindering. And it was very interesting. I'll turn to Senator Harris in just a second. We asked the warden, actually it was Pat Spearman sitting right about where Jennifer is, and the warden was sitting where I am. And Senator Spearman asked the question. And she gave an example of where she was boating on Lake Mead, what possibly could happen to me if I didn't give you my fish or something. And the officer clearly said that he would give you a citation for hindering. So anyway, that's the most, honestly, even though it isn't the cool part of the bill, this is a constitutional right. All of us sitting here have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution. And now this isn't judiciary, but if you look up the constitutional law in Hibble and in Miranda and several others, you are not to be harassed without reasonable suspicion and without probable cause with any of these things. And when they force you to give evidence that could be used against you in a court of law, and if you refuse to do it, you can be given a citation for hindering, that's a violation of the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. Secondly, and I'll get into a little more, hindering is a 12 demerit ticket. That means in Nevada law, you will lose your right to hunt, fish, or trap for up to 3 to 5 years for exercising a constitutional right. You don't have to provide the state with evidence that you're innocent. They have to prove every element of a crime, and you never even have to say boo as far as what you did or not did. You have that kind of protection. All right, before I use up all my time, Senator Harris, would you want to jump in? Because this is the part I know she's most interested in. The other part of it, maybe not so much. I know Senator Scheibel and I worked on the next part, but Senator, if I could go to her, Madam Chair, is that okay if I go to her right now?
Yes, please proceed. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Chair. Members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 235. Now, before I begin, I want to acknowledge something that might surprise some of you. Senator Hansen and I don't often find ourselves on the same side of an issue. In fact, if you were to put us on a political spectrum, you might need a map to find the distance between us. But every once in a while, the stars align and we find common ground. And when that happens, you know it's a good idea. SB 235 is exactly that, good policy. Imagine you're out hunting with a valid permit, following all regulations, when a wildlife officer approaches and demands to see not just your license, but also your firearm, your ammunition, and anything you've caught. You know you're following the law, but should you be required to open up your gear and display everything on demand? And if you refuse, should you be charged with a misdemeanor? That's the problem that Senate Bill 235 aims to fix. This bill makes several thoughtful updates to Nevada's wildlife laws, but I want to focus on one particularly important section. That's section 2, which ensures that our state's approach to wildlife enforcement aligns with core constitutional protections while maintaining effective regulation. Under current law, a person engaged in regulated wildlife activities must produce not only their license or permit upon request, but also any wildlife in their possession, as well as any weapons, ammunition, or related equipment. Refusing to do so is a misdemeanor offense, punishable by a fine. SB 235 makes a critical and necessary correction by eliminating the criminal penalty for refusing to display anything other than the license or permit. It also modernizes the law by allowing individuals to present their license in electronic form, reducing unnecessary bureaucratic barriers. These changes reflect a fundamental principle of governance. While states have the authority to regulate hunting, fishing, and conservation, they must do so in a way that respects the constitutional rights of their citizens. States are not only permitted, but encouraged to provide stronger protections for individual rights than those at the federal level. And that is exactly what this bill seeks to accomplish. It's important to be clear about what SB 235 does not do. The bill does not remove the requirement to carry a valid hunting or fishing license. It does not weaken conservation laws or wildlife protections. It simply ensures that enforcement remains fair, legal, and focused on actual violations. Nevada has long taken pride in maintaining strong wildlife conservation laws while respecting the rights of its citizens. SB 235 upholds this balance by ensuring that compliance with wildlife regulation does not come at the expense of constitutional protections. For these reasons, I strongly urge the committee to support Senate Bill 235. Thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Thanks, Senator. Come back to me real quick. I'm sorry. I know you like the 15-minute rule, but this is impossible at the moment.
You actually have 3 minutes and 26 seconds.
I know, but you got to give me a little window because I wanted to have an extra senator. Now, let's jump to the second part of the bill. Dallas said it brilliantly. I want to lay the foundation of why this violates constitutional law, okay? And that's really what the first part of the bill. Jump to the last section. Real quick, you are on a trip on Lake Mead in a boat, and you pull up, you see some bighorn sheep, and you guys pull off, and you decide to go for a hike. And while hiking up the hill, you find one of these. That is a bighorn sheep horn, okay? So everybody's excited. You bring it back down to, wait, don't take the picture yet. You'll like the next one better. You bring this back down to everybody on the boat, and you go, wow, look what I found. And then everybody goes, oh, I want to see it. So you go climb back up, and then you find this. That's the deadhead, okay, as it's called in law. Now, whoop, whoop, whoop. No, they're pretty tough. Okay, that's, when we're talking about a deadhead, this is a bighorn sheep. This was actually killed by a mountain lion, I'm 99% sure, in the Desatoya Range in central Nevada. To me, this is one of the great trophies. I found 3 of these in my lifetime. And right now, according to the way that the law is being interpreted, this is a crime. Back to the screen real quick. You'll notice I handed these out. There was a copyright issue, so I actually handed these out. This is this year's Nevada Big Game Regulations. If you look at the very bottom of the print page, it says at the very bottom, at all times, skulls with horns or antlers attached are unlawful to collect or possess if found. Jump to one more page. Look at the bottom there. This is a really interesting one. It is unlawful to pick up antlers still attached to a skull, deadhead. I've committed a crime right here. If I only found that portion of it, sorry. These guys slam into the head, man. You don't see them. Anyway, this is a deadhead. So, I think those are super cool. Now, just so you know, obviously I was nervous about bringing it because some of you aren't so into this kind of stuff like I am. The point in all that, though, is should that be a crime? You're at Lake Mead and you find that horn or one of those skulls, should you be prosecuted under Nevada law? Now, next slide, an interesting thing. This is actually, the amendment is what the bill will actually, this amendment is the deadhead portion of the bill. We actually copied this from a law in Arizona. Because we had how are you going to come up with, if it's not fresh, how would you make it so that's not a crime? Okay, So that will actually be the amendment. Person may, for non-commercial purposes, without obtaining the required tag, take or gather, we gotta get rid of the word take, I'll show you that in a minute, or gather a skull or head with or without antlers or horns detached, or bones from the carcass of any species of wildlife for which a tag is required if such a part of the carcass is exposed dry bone resulting from natural processes, including without limitation, scavenging, decomposition, or weathering. Then NDOW pointed out to me, we do in 501088 have the word take. We have to remove the word take because it has a different meaning in that section. Now here's the interesting part. If you actually, oh, I'm sorry, this is the violation for the second part, of our bill, where if you exercise your constitutional right to not incriminate yourself, you'll get a ticket for hindering. Hindering is a 12 demerit ticket. You will lose your hunting, fishing, and trapping license for up to 5 years. Now, this is a more interesting thing. Senator Scheibel and I were actually on legislative commission together, and they brought a bill. You'll notice this was rejected by the legislative commission. It says right in there, look at the top yellow line. This regulation, CGR 475, was it passed the Wildlife Commission and then failed to pass its final round of approval at the Nevada Legislative Commission. Okay? Then they tried to bring it back this time, and I told them, Senator Scheibel and I and others do not think our legislative intent was to criminalize the picking up of an animal skull, horn, or antler. But the reason I brought this one, now this is the one that I picked up from Mark Foreign Strike. I gave you a hard copy because of a possible copyright violation. You'll notice in there it says it's illegal, but notice at the very bottom, CGR 475. That's Commission General Regulation 475. That's the one right there that we said no to at the Legislative Commission. They're enforcing a law that the legislature said no. We don't agree. We don't think that's the legislative intent. We don't think people should be prosecuted, yet they put it in the regulation. Now here's the weird part. Keep going. While we were putting this bill presentation together today, actually, we started looking online. Notice online, though, that sentence is gone. They took it out. Now, so there's two sets of laws floating around out there, one of which says what Ira Hansen just showed you is a crime. It's also a 6 demerit crime, I might add. And then ditto for the next one. You'll notice online, that whole sentence is gone, where it says it is unlawful to pick up antlers still attached to a skull. So, again, in both those cases, legislative intent was never to allow you to be prosecuted if you find an antler with skull attached to a skull, or bones, or horns, or anything else. So it's very important we clear that up. And that's the second part of the bill. Real quick, the very first sentence in the bill, 2 years ago, we passed a law to basically, we had Rex Flowers here, if you remember, for those of you who were here then, to allow a grandfather to give a tag to a grandson type of an arrangement. But we left it as may instead of shall. 2 years later, they still haven't done it. Now, I didn't realize why we had left it may. That created a fiscal note. So when you had a fiscal note, it killed us. We left it as may. Paul Young is here from the Wildlife Commission, and he and I met, and he said that, look, we're going to have it done within the year. So if you leave it at May, I'll guarantee you that it will get done. So to avoid the fiscal note, I want to do that. The first part of the bill, again, real quick, that's a constitutional right. Whether you think game wardens or whoever should be able to go out and talk to people, fine. You should not be forced to incriminate yourself. That's a clear violation of fundamental constitutional right. On the deadhead issue, I already showed you one other thing. If you're out in the hills, that's an antler. It does have a little bit of skull attached to it. The way it's worded now, if this thing had the skull and the other horn on it, it would be a crime for me to pick it up. Now here's the weird part. If I take a hammer or a rock and I smash the skull into pieces, I can keep the antlers. There's just no logic in this. And there is no logical reason to make crimes out of activities that have zero influence on wildlife populations, poaching, or anything else. So I think it's very important because studying the older laws, the legislative intent, when you go back and read the minutes and so forth, was never to allow people to be prosecuted for things like this or disgusting head that you guys are getting. I knew I was worried about that one, Melanie especially. But anyway, this is no crime, okay? We gotta make sure in law that we get that out. And then I definitely want to make sure, honestly, the most important part of that bill is not the deadhead part. It's your constitutional liberties. We should always protect people's civil rights. And I know I went into kind of a long rambling thing, but I wanted to do that because you gotta understand a little bit of the background, how important it is for us as legislators to protect fundamental constitutional rights. You and I have needs. The state always has all the advantages. One of the things I learned as the chair of judiciary, and it was a very interesting thing. At that time, the public defender was Steve Yeager, chair, and I was chair of judiciary. And I actually met with all of the district attorneys, a very impressive group of men, and they talked me into getting rid of this one preliminary process that they use in prosecuting, and it seemed reasonable to me. And it turns out it wasn't. It was terrible. And Steve Yeager and Jason Frierson actually had lost in the 2014 election, but he'd been my chair in the 2013 session. And he called me. He said, Ira, you cannot allow that to go forward. And then Steve Yeager said, Ira, if you let this pass, I'm going to resign as being a public defender. And that was when I realized the average person, the real hero in the criminal justice system, are the public defenders. It's glamorous to be the DA. It's glamorous to prosecute the bad guys. Who protects the little guy? And one thing you really learn, I won't get into it, I'm way over time, I'm sorry, Chair. One thing you'll learn is if you've got resources, you can mount a reasonable defense, even if you're innocent or guilty. If you don't, you're at the mercy of the state. The state has everything. So these fundamental constitutional rights we have to protect. So I know that talking about the common law in England and the English Civil Wars and all that, it's way like, okay, why are you going there, Ira? Because when you understand the fundamentals of our Constitution and the protections, that's our job. We swore an oath, very first thing we did. So if in doubt, always err on the side of protecting civil rights and civil liberties. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Senator Hansen. We have some great sound bites there. Maybe you want to sign on to my civil rights bill.
As Dallas would note, I have signed on civil rights bill. Right, Dallas? I'm conservative and she's liberal, but there's some areas we're in total harmony.
So we're going to now take any questions from committee members. Senator Ellison.
I knew he was a criminal.
But they have to prove it, John. I don't have to prove I'm not.
Thank you. I think this was very informative. But here's one of the questions I got. You're out there hunting. You said they might have seen you out there shooting at a duck, whatever. But he comes up and says, okay, I want to see your license and I want to see your permit and I want to check your weapon. I always have a big problem with handing somebody a loaded gun that has no idea what that gun is capable of doing. I might have a 2-pound trigger. I might have safety locked up. There's a lot of things I could have done. But the problem is, I don't like handing anybody a weapon out away from me.
Okay, well, to answer your question, first of all, there is a thing called the open field doctrine. What that means is a game warden, if you're out in the hills, you can be spied on, basically. They can watch you. However, in the absence of them seeing you commit a crime, remember, they have a right to come and ask you about your licenses and stuff, but they don't have a right beyond that to actually come and say, well, I have reasonable suspicion you've done something wrong, mister. And I'll show my license, and they go, hey, are you, what? And getting back to John's point, well, let me see your shotgun. Now, many of you don't know it, but if you're hunting ducks, you have to use steel shot. A lot of people don't know that. They use lead shot. That's a crime. So I give them my shotgun, thinking everything's fine, and they check it, and, oh, look what I found. You're using lead shot. I'm sorry, I'm to write you up for that. I just incriminated myself by providing the evidence, even though I hadn't committed any crime. I just gave him the evidence to give me a citation. So before they can go in the field, even though it's an open field thing, if there's watching me and I have a limit of 5 ducks and they see me shoot 7, that's reasonable, a reasonable reason to come and investigate me for a criminal act. But in the absence of that, they don't have any business really coming and bothering you. And that's a very important distinction, because the way it's set up right now, if we don't change this law, is not only can they come and bother you, but you are forced to provide for them evidences that may convict you in a criminal case. Like Senator Ellison just said, I hand them my loaded shotgun, they then work the action, and you have lead in there. Well, now you've convicted yourself. They didn't know you're using lead. They again have to prove every element of a crime. You don't have to prove you're not guilty. They have to prove you are. So I hope that answers it, John.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Ellison, correction.
We have Senator Scheibel.
Thank you both, former Senator Harris, Senator Hansen, for this presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would attend your History of Constitutional Law TED Talk. And also, for those of you following along, I know that Senator Hansen is sincere when he says that the public defenders are the real heroes in our criminal justice system, and how important the work is that they do. Because we've had a lot of conversations over the years about criminal justice, about the Constitution, about protecting people's rights, about the power of the state. And I think that this bill strikes a really nice balance, actually, and you explained why. We're still going to require people to exhibit a license or a permit, but we're not going to require them to hand over their, the weapon, ammunition, device, or any apparatus in his or her possession. I mean, that's awfully broad. So I appreciate that about the bill. I guess this is more of a comment than a question. I think that I just wanted to clarify, I guess, that you're suggesting that we amend it and leave the may in section 1 instead of changing it to shall, even though it seems like an awfully, well, I guess this is not it's not a money committee, so I won't comment on the size of that fiscal note. But I just wanted to clarify that that's a proposed amendment.
Yes, thank you. I won't say Madam Chair, but you're not the chair in this case, Senator Scheibel. This eliminates the fiscal note by leaving it may. And Paul Young is going to come up to testify against my bill anyway, so you'll have another chance to talk to him. So you can ask him, are you guys going to get that done? Because that was something that was important that we passed last session.
Yeah.
So
I guess I will just throw out one more kind of hypothetical or some more food for thought, which is that by removing this misdemeanor penalty for somebody not providing the weapon or any apparatus in their possession, you don't strip them of, their other constitutional rights. You also don't strip the state of its investigatory powers, because unless there's something that I'm missing, and maybe legal could weigh in here, I mean, at this point, you would be subject to the same constitutional laws that apply if somebody is suspected of having drugs on their person, right? A police officer doesn't have the right to walk in here right now and say, Melanie, empty your pockets. But if I was, out back and it was dark and I made a furtive movement, and they approached me and said, hey, would you be willing to empty your pockets? I can still do that voluntarily, and then we can go to court and debate whether that was a consensual encounter, whether I handed over those drugs willingly. So what I'm saying is that you could still have officers approaching people in the field and saying, without reading Miranda rights, they can just say, hey, what are you hunting for today? Hey, what are you doing out here today? And it's up to that hunter or that person to decide to engage in that interaction or not, right?
Absolutely. And honestly, very few people have any clue about all the stuff I've been talking about, okay? And because you're a lawyer, you were a prosecutor, you understand the constitutional concepts behind the state being forced to do every single thing. The average person in the field has no idea. And there are so many laws that you can violate. This is actually the field guide that the wardens use in the field. This is to tell, all the different wildlife laws, right? I have the exact same one from 1988. There are 200 more laws that are on this now than there were in 1988. There's this constant escalation of law in Nevada, and consequently, the average person knows less and less about their own rights. So, and like this, you guys, if you have the actual hard copies, like that, look at all the laws there are right now on the books that do make all sorts of things illegal. Now, how many of you would have thought picking up an antler could possibly be illegal? Nobody. So anyway, I don't want to rehash the hearing, But I agree completely with you. These are very fundamental constitutional things, but more importantly, we need to kind of make it reasonable so people aren't breaking the law in Nevada unintentionally or for something that, why do we have a law in the first place? We're not saving anything, wildlife law, poaching, any of that sort of thing. I'm sorry, you know what, Madam Chair, I've gone way over. I want to make sure that Senator Harris, by the way, does everybody know that Senator Harris's younger brother is Sebastian, who is the lawyer for Gaming Control Board? Wave, Sebastian, you're a hero. Anyway, I wanted to, is anybody, any more questions? Oh, thank you.
Yes, this is how we run things here. Senator Pazina.
Thank you so much, Chair. Senator Harris, there are no words for how wonderful it is to see you. Senator Hansen, I see you every day, so there are words.
They're all negative. I noticed when I came to this podium thing, Ira Hansen for the record, you didn't say, I'm one of your favorite senators, but everybody else gets that treatment.
I don't want your wife to come. Okay, let's decorum.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So the question, looking in section 2, part 2, I was just curious in regards to the license or permit. Do those come in electronic form as well as in written? And is it currently legal to have that in written or electronic form on your person?
Thank you. I didn't cover that. The Department of Wildlife told me that you can, actually, they've been doing it electronically, but it's not in statute. So technically, you had to have a physical paper copy of the license when you're in the field. You can have it, you know, if I'm like, okay, Warden, here's my thing. Just so you know, if I had to do this over again, I probably wouldn't make it so they could just come up and ask you about licenses. After studying the Hibble decisions and so forth, that goes really against some of those fundamental things. But we left it in because, to be reasonable, as Senator Scheibel said, we're trying to get a balance here. So I'm not touching that. But yeah, just to answer your question completely, yes, by putting it in law, though, it guarantees it. The Department of Wildlife told me, yeah, we already do that anyway. I said, well, good, you're not opposed to them putting it in statute. And they said, they're here in opposition, so maybe they oppose that part, but I don't think so.
Thank you so much, Senator Hansen. I am a school principal. I am in the military, and I really know how to run a very military-type meeting. But I really enjoy that everyone feels safe and comfortable here to share their authentic self and be able to ask those questions and be able to bring show and tell. So I appreciate that. Well, with that being said,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
if you will please take a seat with your friend over there. We are going to be hearing, starting with testimony in support of Senate Bill 235. As a reminder, we are limiting testimony to 2 minutes each. Testifiers are encouraged to summarize their positions and submit more comprehensive testimony in writing. We do have a timer to keep us honest. And please state your first name, spell your last name for the record, and you may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon. Paloma Guerrero, Paloma-Guerrero, on behalf of the Clark County Public Defender's Office. As public defenders, we didn't always get to support a ton of bills, so super excited to do so when we can. And we're happy to support Senator Hansen's bill today. By making the statutory changes, SB 235 will protect the Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights of permitted hunters and fishers. The Fourth Amendment protects people from unreasonable searches and seizures of their property, while the Fifth Amendment protects people from being compelled to incriminate themselves. Under the current statute, a game warden can merely walk up to a person hunting or fishing and demand they show them any animals, weapons, ammo, or other devices in their possession. This is not a power that the state has anywhere else, and in effect, it's forcing Nevadans that fish or hunt to provide evidence that could get them convicted. Even repealing this section, hunters and fishers will still be required to identify themselves through their permit or license. It would still be a misdemeanor offense to not identify yourself, but removing these provisions will protect the constitutional rights of Nevadans that hunt or fish. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Nick Shepek, N-I-C-K-S-H-E-P-A-C-K. I am the Nevada State Director of the Fines and Fees Justice Center here in support today originally when I heard there was a deadhead bill, the Jerry Garcia loving side of me got very excited. Once I read the bill, I realized that this was an issue for my organization, Fines and Fees Justice Center. Essentially, as the law is working now, it reads like stop and frisk, but in the woods. That is allowing for self-incrimination and searches, the type of laws that we have fought against over previous sessions when we talk about things like pretextual stops that end in searches, and stop and frisk laws. Anytime a person is subjected to a criminal financial penalty and there's a possibility that their rights are being violated, the Fines and Fees Justice Center supports any fixes to that. We got to the end of the bill, and we also noticed that if it is indeed illegal to have such things in your possession, I think every single one of my Northern Nevada friends is a criminal, and the absurdity of that is something that we also believe should be removed from law. For those reasons, we support and ask you to do the same.
Angela Knott from the Washoe County Public Defender's Office, ANGELAKNOTT. Just following up from my colleagues, I'd like to say ditto, and we support this bill. Thank you.
Great, let us begin in Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas that would like to provide testimony in support for Senate Bill 235? Seeing none, we will now move to the phone lines. AVH, is there anyone on the line wishing to provide support testimony?
If you would like to testify in support of Senate Bill 235, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers wishing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you, AVH. Next, we'll move to testimony in opposition for Senate Bill 235. Is anyone that would like to provide opposition, please come forward, state your first name, spell your last name for the record, and you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. I like the
Please
strategy.
take that for the record, Madam Secretary.
Paul Young, on behalf of the Board of Wildlife Commissioners, I'd like to thank Senator Hansen for the entertaining presentation. It was one of the better presentations I've seen in this building. So here today, sitting at the table, unfortunately in the opposition position, however, will be with a supportive neutral tone. As Senator Hansen stated, as to Section 1, the Mr. Rex Flowers transfer tags, the commission is in support and was working on it. And Senator Hansen's correct that should get done on a regulatory position. And again, I apologize, that's not been done, but we're supportive of that. And I believe there was a concern from the department as to the fiscal impact, as to the technology of transferring the tag, and that was the hangup. But I don't believe the commission has any issue with the policy, and thought it was a good bill last session. As to Section 2, there were some concerns. Again, I'm not going to go into detail on that. I'm going to probably let that for the department. As to Section 4, the concerns were, and again, supportive. Senator Hansen is correct. Something should be done as to the deadhead regulations as they current stand. This would be a good cleanup. With that being said, the word on line 14 of take, before take or gather, there's just a concern there because take could be construed as harvest. The commission would rather just see it say gather, so you're just picking up a deadhead. And again, would defer to the senator on that, but that was a concern. And then lastly, again, would like to see this cleaned up, but the commission wanted to see some kind of a check-in. Currently, if you harvest a bighorn sheep with a tag, you have to check it in and get it plugged. And I know Senator Hansen's goal here is this is not a harvest, this is a gathering of a deadhead, and to kind of make it clean and easy for the individual, which again, I believe the commission supports that, but they wanted to see some kind of a check-in or some kind of a contact with the department just to get around the potential of poaching. So I think I hit my 3 minutes.
It was perfect, thank you. Go ahead.
Afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is James Mortimer, for the record, M-O-R-T-I-M-O-R-E, and I am the Vice President of the Nevada Police Union, representing state law enforcement across Nevada. On behalf of all state game wardens who are represented by the Nevada Police Union, we are here in opposition of this bill. Game wardens play a vital role in protecting Nevadans' natural resources, preserving wildlife, ensuring the safety of the boating public safety, and promoting public safety. This bill seeks to strip game wardens of their police powers and administrative ability to check and ensure hunting public don't have loaded rifles in their vehicle, which tragically caused the loss of life in Elko County not too long ago. This bill looks to stop game wardens' administrative ability to ensure wildlife taken in this state are within regulation, not poached, taken over limit, or misidentified and unlawfully in possession. These sorts of administrative powers are found throughout the country, and they were placed in law to ensure public safety for Nevadans and protect our natural resources. Hunting and fishing is a highly regulated activity, and case law can be found throughout the courts that the language currently in 502.120 does not violate the Fourth Amendment. Please show your support for state law enforcement by opposing SB 235. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, committee members, for the record, Larry Johnson, Coalition for Nevada's Wildlife. Highly supportive of the majority of this bill. The deadhead portion is long overdue, but I agree that there needs to be some check-in with NDOW. I think the regs and the stats are built around protection against poaching, but as usual, when you try to eliminate what the 0.5% does, you penalize the other 99% of the honest people out there. Quite frankly, most sportsmen, I think every rancher's got a deadhead tacked to his barn, et cetera, on that. Needs to be cleaned up, and I got to thank Senator Hansen for that. Same thing with Rex Flowers' transfer of tags from adults to those less than 18 years old. A good portion, and again, needs to be followed up on. And the only reason I'm testifying in opposition is because of Section 2. Hunting in the state of Nevada is a privilege. It's not a right unless you're a Native American on your Indian reservation, okay? And when you choose to exercise that privilege and buy a hunting license, in my opinion, you are stating that you are willing to abide by existing regulations and statutes. I think any warden should have the ability to check if someone has shot too many chukar, too many ducks, whether he's got a plug in his shotgun for waterfowl hunting, whether he's using steel shot as mandated by federal law for migratory birds. I think elimination of that provision invites violations, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any more in opposition of Senate Bill 235? One more. You're in Carson. Begin when you're ready.
For the record, thank you, Chairwoman. I'm Greg Smith, SMITH. I'm mostly in favor of the bill. The only one that concerns me is the Section 2. Section 4 I'm good with. Something needs to be done there. The only issue that's been brought up before is poaching. And I'm afraid that leaves a little bit of a window for a poacher, and I hate to see that. But my concern is with Section 2. Currently, and picture me in the field, or as anyone, driving along, warden stops and says, the first thing they say is your license, see that. The second thing is, I need to see your gun. Well, it's illegal to have a loaded weapon in your vehicle. So I assume that's the way it is. So you give them the gun and they check and it's empty and you're fine, good to go. The other one that concerns me is under my tarp, there's a deer butt sticking out, just the butt. And it seems like I could have a doe and it's only buck season. So at that point, he can ask, I gotta check your animal. So rightly so, they should be able to do that. I think if we change this law, that's gonna go away. So it's just a consideration as a sportsman, and like I said, I'm testifying on by myself. But anyway, it's just a couple thoughts I had that should come into play. That's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It doesn't look like we have anyone in Las Vegas, so we're going to turn to the phone lines. AVH, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 235?
Jerry, your public line is open and working, but you have no callers at this time.
Finally, is there anyone wishing to testify in neutral for Senate Bill 235 here in Carson City? Please state your name and begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Mike Scott, Deputy Director of the Nevada Department of Wildlife. I have Christy Knight, Chief of the Law Enforcement Division with me. We'd like to just speak in neutral about some of the parts of this bill. With respect to the junior tag transfer, it is our intent to move forward with that. We have a tag allocation and application hunt committee that adopted language with respect to junior tag transfer. It has not gone forward to the Wildlife Commission yet for adoption. The main reason is that we're trying to get e-tags and e-licenses in place, and we would like to do that first. That is our priority, and it takes it's a tremendous amount of time and effort to get that in place by our vendor, which is Gordon Darby. And once that gets into place, then we will go forward with the junior tag transfer, and it should be a lot easier to do once we have the e-tag in place. It should make it much easier to accomplish.
Chief Game Warden Christy Knight, KNIGHT. I'm just here if you do have any questions.
Seeing none?
you.
We
Actually-
do have one from Senator Scheibel.
So, thank you for being here and thank you for answering our questions. I imagine that a lot of the enforcement work that our wildlife agents do out in the field is, policing misdemeanors, and you'd be issuing citations on site. But I know there are also, I imagine you could also encounter some felony investigations. I imagine you could also encounter investigations where you don't know what kind of charges you're dealing with at that particular time. So my question is, when NDOW officers are in the field right now, if they encounter a situation where they are interested in obtaining information or obtaining possible evidence that they currently need a search warrant for, how do they obtain a search warrant?
Chief Game Warden Christy Knight, for the record. To obtain a search warrant, you have to have probable cause, and then you have to write up an affidavit, take it to the judge to sign off on, and then that's how you get your search warrant currently.
And so more specifically, my question is, does the department employ administrative law judges with that power? Do you go to a justice of the peace in the jurisdiction where the possible violation occurred, or something else?
Chief Game Warden Christy Knight, for the record. You would go, it's usually to the district court in the county that the violation occurred in.
Okay, thank you.
Mike Scott, for the record. The last thing I would like to address is the deadhead language at the end. The deadhead issue has been an issue for Nevada Department of Wildlife for decades. And we have tried in recent years to solve that issue by having people report the deadheads to us and then bring them in so that we can make sure that they're harvested or collected legally, that it's a natural death. And what we adopted initially was that if the animal was a natural death, whether it was starved to death, disease, or taken by a predator, that those animals would be legal for people to collect. If it was an unnatural death, if it was caused by humans, caught in a fence, hit by a car, shot and lost, things like that, then those would belong to the people of the state of Nevada, and the Department of Wildlife would keep those animals. And so that's what we've been trying to do. This language, we had language last session that we were trying to come forward with that would do kind of what this language does here. I think that we could look at some alternatives to it, but it's basically we support that part of it. Thank you.
Okay, sounds like this is a Doge bill to cut down on some of that oversight. Okay, we're gonna move on. AVH, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in neutral for Senate Bill 235?
Chair, your public line is open and working. However, you have no callers at this time.
I will now close the hearing on, Sponsor, please come back and do your closing statements. Yes, sorry about that.
Ira Hansen, real quick. First of all, I apologize. I've been doing this for a while, and I know all of you almost, and so it's more casual than probably should be if I call you by your first name, John or Melanie. I apologize for that. Should be more professional when you do a bill, so you'll have to forgive me for that. The one thing I do want to address that I didn't, and that is the idea of rights versus privileges. You have it's a privilege to drive an automobile. It's a privilege for me to be a plumbing contractor. And it's a privilege to hunt and fish. You don't give up your constitutional rights when you get those licenses. And that's very important. So when people say, well, hunting, you gotta, that's a privilege. Well, all these things we do that get a license is a privilege. And none of those do you ever give up any of your fundamental civil rights. So that argument is not valid. As far as attempting to, the language, this language is taken, the amended language, I'm sorry, is taken from Arizona. It's already on the books. Deals with all the issues we've been trying to come up with. We don't want a process where we have to force people to go to the Department of Wildlife and then see if it was killed naturally or not, because nobody will know about it and then they're criminals. So anyway, thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to do the presentation. Pardon again for being a little more casual. I probably should have been, but thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Senator Hansen. You can come back up here as we listen to another colleague's bill. Or hear another colleague's bill. I'll give everybody about a minute to kind of readjust here. Thank you. I know we have a lot of boxes and skulls up here. We got to move. We are almost ready to begin our second bill hearing on Senate Bill 215. So if you would like to come up here, Senator Titus.
Well, you forgot the first bill here.
I know. This is a measure that revises provisions relating to wildlife. I'm trying to say this slowly so Senator Scheibel gets back in the room. Our bill presenter is Senator Titus. You're allotted 15 minutes, but if you need more, you can request additional time. Set the time. Okay, perfect. Then we can begin right when she enters, and I'll start the timer at that time. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Madam Chair Cruz Crawford and members of the Senate Committee on Natural Resources. My name is Robin Titus, and I represent Senate District 17. And thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 215. This seems to be Dead Animal Day, and it's like an interesting concept, and we certainly support live animals and encourage that thought, although these bills do address animals when they're unfortunately killed. Just so you probably already know, I think I've presented before on another bill, but Senate District 17 represents 6 rural counties. So this bill is important in my area. I represent Douglas County, Lyon County, Churchill County, Mineral County, Esmeralda County, and a good portion of Nye County, specifically all North Nye County and Tonopah. Senate Bill 215 is a bill to prevent the waste of edible portions of our state's wildlife accidentally struck by a vehicle. Currently, the ability to salvage game species is limited by state law. I've submitted 3 exhibits to all of you that you can find on Nellis. One is a proposed amendment provided for me by the Director, Alan Janae, the Director of Department of Wildlife. And that amendment addresses the fact that these animals sometimes are killed other than a vehicle, specifically, say, a train. And it was their idea that we want to be able to salvage these animals, too, for not just the edible portion, but I'll address that in a bit. Number 2 is an article that's actually in our Nevada Big Game Hunting magazine related to chronic wasting disease. And so that you can read that and there's a better understanding of the disease that we're going to address in this bill. And number 3 is an informational memo that I had the research division of the LCB prepare for me when I was working on this bill, because I wanted to see what other states have done. And one of the things when I hear a bill presented and somebody comes up with an idea, I always want to know, well, are we going to be the first in Nevada to do this? Is this in some other state? And if so, how do they run those programs? So you can look at that, and it was a very thorough job done by the research division on all the other states, and there's currently 36 other states that allow this process. It's been long coming in Nevada, and I've previously presented different portions of this bill with Assemblywoman Bilberry Axelrod over a number of years because we have recognized the need to do this. This bill now is being presented with, the first thing I did was reach out to the director of NDOW and said, hey, this is a long time overdue. How can we make this work? How can we join together to produce something that the department would be comfortable with? So, you know, the sponsors on this bill is pretty a unique group of folks that you wouldn't typically see sponsor a bill. So it's myself, Senator Daley, Senator York, and then Assemblyman York and Assemblyman Watts. And we are the Sportsman's Caucus. Sportsman's Caucus, there's a Congressional Sportsman's Caucus, which is a nationwide group of folks who are into sports, whether it's fishing or hunting or just hiking outdoors specifically. And we are the co-chairs of the Nevada Sportsman's Caucus. And so we all agreed that this was one of the bills that we as a caucus would like to bring forward. There are only 2 sections of the bill that I would like to walk the committee briefly through before discussing the 3 exhibits that I sent out to you. So section 1 of the bill requires that the Board of Wildlife Commissioners adopt regulations requiring NDOW to issue the salvage permits that authorize a person to salvage and collect any wildlife killed as a result of the vehicle collision. The bill further prohibits the Commission from prescribing a fee for the issuance of a salvage permit. Additionally, the Commission may, by regulation, prohibit the Department from issuing salvage permit if any wildlife in the state is confirmed to be tested positive for a disease called, short CWD, which is chronic wasting disease. We need to stay really vigilant to prevent the spread of this disease. And I know we have a limited amount of time, but I want you to refer to the handout I mentioned about that's included in all of our big game applications. Just a brief overview of that disease. It's actually formed by something we call a spongiform. Now, that's a weird thing. It's not a bacteria. It's not a virus. It's not a parasite. We haven't been able to identify it, but it does weird things to the neurons in the brains. We see it in humans. I've had a case when I was an intern. We see it in cattle. It's called chronic wasting disease in cattle also, but it's also called mad cow disease. So this gets in the brains of these animals, and they don't eat, they don't drink, and they literally waste away. This thing is pretty fascinating, because one of the reasons that I thought it would be really important to have salvage permits is it was actually diagnosed for the first time in California in Bishop, California. And the way it was found, it was a roadkill that they salvaged, and they did the analysis on it, and it had chronic wasting disease. So literally in their big game book, NDAL has addressed that it would be helpful to have these roadkills tested for this disease. And so that's something we really want to pay attention to, and that would be part of the responsibility when the Wildlife Commission comes up with their plans, that these, if you salvage this animal, you have to take it in to be analyzed. And I think that will give them more data. And I personally, as a hunter, I'm one of those hunters that when I salvage, it was voluntary when I got my elk last year. This year it was mandated because where my deer tag was, I was in that area close to the California border, and so it's mandated that we give the proper pieces of the brain stem to the department to do that testing. So I'm incredibly supportive of doing this testing. So Section 2, wildlife do not wait until hunting season to cross the roads. So Section 2 provides that a person holding a salvagement is issued by regulation of the commission adopted pursuant to Section 1, exempt from the prohibitions of having a wildlife or any part thereof during the time when the killing of such animal is prohibited. So we saw game wardens here and due cause for investigation would be somebody having a buck in the back of their pickup truck and it's not hunting season. I think that would be appropriate to stop somebody. So, I mean, these things happen when we're not in hunting season and animals get killed, and we would be able to salvage them regardless of whether it's hunting season or you have a bill permit or not. The other thing is this bill would become effective October 1st, and that would give some time then for the Wildlife Commission to come up with the regulations. I know this is a policy committee. NDAL did mention that they might be submitting a fiscal note, but we don't know what that's going to be. And I think a lot of will depend, and we can't determine the impact and whether there's going to be a cost to them. Again, the Wildlife Commission would still have to do the regulations before we do that. I mentioned that I had already submitted an amendment, and that I addressed, and you should have a copy of that, and that was submitted by Director Janae, and I thought it was an excellent point that we would just add that wildlife killed as a result of a vehicle collision or any other incidental fatal event as determined by the department. They do get hit by trains and other things, so that would be potentially, you could test those too. So I want to say, according to the research I've submitted for your consideration in the third exhibit, there are 35 states that I mentioned earlier that allow for the salvage and possession of certain animals killed or severely injured by a motor vehicle. And I understand that with limited time, I'm not going to go over all the states and what they do. But again, for me, as somebody who likes to ask a lot of questions, I want to know what other states have done. I'm submitting it to that if you would like to look at that. So hopefully we'll consider passing this bill to not let that meat go to waste. In the past, years and years ago, if an animal was hit by the side of the road, NDOT would load it in the truck, take it to the orphanage, or give it somewhere, not to waste that animal. And so we just hate wasting. Also, I want to point out that just before I get to ask the question, I had somebody actually in my own caucus ask me, well, aren't this going to encourage people to run over these animals? And I looked at this person and I said, number one, that's already against the law. This law would not be changed. It's already illegal to deliberately run into an animal. Second, nobody's going to ruin their $100,000 pickup truck to run over an animal with a minimal amount of meat. And so those would be not even acceptable argument. And finally, I want to point out to the chair that these are all freshly killed animals. And although I appreciate having a deodorizer for my vehicle, if I happen to pick up one of these animals would not be starting to decay. This is freshly harvested meat. And so I appreciate the consideration. Sorry, Madam Chair, I couldn't resist. So I appreciate the consideration and allowing me to present this bill, and I will step back, or I'm actually happy to have any questions.
Thank you so much. We do have a few questions, but I wanted to let you know You only received that, and I didn't want anyone else. I know it's gonna be collector item. I don't want Senator Hansen to get jealous that he did not receive one. There was only one. The caucus voted to give it to Senator Titus. Okay, so we have a few questions for Senator Pazina, and then we can follow by Senator Ellison. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And this is not being a member of the Sportsman Caucus, I do have a question. So with these salvage permits, my understanding is someone's driving along and the worst thing that can possibly happen does, and they hit an animal that then would be salvaged. How does the whole salvage permit process work? Because it seems like you wouldn't just know to get a salvage permit and then you hit an animal and then you're good to take it because you have the salvage permit. So how does that whole process work?
Thank you, Senator Titus, for the, may I go directly to the senator? So thank you for that question, because that is why we are putting this in the lap of the Wildlife Commission to come up with those regulations, to get specific on how that will work. The thoughts just generally would be, you notify law enforcement anyway when you get into an accident, typically, and then that law enforcement could give you a permit. Somehow that will have to be figured out. Other states do it that way, where you don't get a tag per se, but you get a receipt that says, here, you notified us, you can now take this. And I think that would be all of us that hunt, there's gonna have to be a public relations thing to notify, hey, it's legal. People in my community already thought it was legal, because I've talked about this, and I said, no, this has to be a process here. So again, it'll have to be education, that they know to get the permit. We'll have to see what the Wildlife Commission comes up with, and then the regulation will have to be passed. And again, this is gonna have to be hunter education, like in sportsmen's or anywhere, if you hit a vehicle, there'll have to be some public world. And that's where maybe the cost of this might come into. And I don't even know, frankly, if I might continue, Madam Chair, we don't know how many actually are going to use this. We know in some states that have limited wildlife, only a few ever get reported or picked up. In other states that have a lot of killings, it's more accessed. Correct. So we'll have to see, and that's where the cooperative agreement with the Wildlife Commission to come up with these regulations will help solve these questions.
Thank you so much. And I would say I hope that this bill and the Sportsman Caucus also supports, in addition to this bill, the wildlife crossing bill, because they do seem to go hand in hand with each other, or paw and paw, I guess is the case may be, but
Or hoof and hoof.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What are we having for dinner? Mountain lion or wild horse? Oh, go ahead, Senator Ellison.
Thank you. I've got two questions. What if you go to cut out the back part of the brain and you take it over to Endow and they test it? How long does that take to get the results back? In the meantime, what do you do with the animal?
So you actually can take that, like I've taken that brainstem portion too, and it can take various times depending on how many they have at the time. If it's hunting season, it might have a whole bunch there. If it's, we certainly can have the agency, they're gonna be here and reporting in neutral on this bill. So we certainly can ask them those technical questions, how long will it take? And we'll have to see. I had already, frankly, when I harvested my deer this year, we keep our own, maybe more detailed than you want to know, but I'm a person that when I harvest an animal, I never let that meat out of my sight, other than when it's hanging in my barn. I process it, I make my own burger, I take care of it. And so we had already eaten part of it before that report came back, but that's not going to affect the meat quality. It's in the brain portions, and so I wouldn't be afraid to go ahead and have that. I didn't wait until I got my report back.
And that's one of my follow-ups is, how long you could take it and butcher it right away then, so even though you're waiting for it. So it's something that you can't.
Right, in the national, and just Senator Titus, if I might, Madam Chair, go directly to Senator Ellison. So when we're hunting and we have a tag and we harvest our animal, we take it home and we send in our test. We don't, and this would be no different. We don't wait for the results to come back. The other key to this would be that, and this is something I agreed with Director Janae on, once there is one animal in the state that has that the disease is positive, then we would no longer allow for this harvest.
Yeah. And then the other thing is if you, this permit you're talking about, why would you have to have a permit if it's already dead and it's on the side of the road? And believe me, I know all about hitting deer on the highway. I got 2 brand-new Grand Cherokees. So you don't run over deer on purpose.
No, and that, thank you, Senator Titus, for the response, and thank you for the question, Senator. I know your story very well, and I know that your wife was quite mad at you as you destroyed their
Brand new.
vehicle. But again, the point is that having a permit makes sure that it's no question that somebody would hit it on purpose or shoot it out of season or any of those things, that this person is recognized. And we want the testing. Frankly, we want to know that you picked up that animal and that now we can test it. Because one of the advantages of this bill is actually going to help the department because they need more specimen. They want to monitor throughout this state. So in their own testimony or in their own book, they say, having more animals harvested on the side of the road, they pick them up and test them. And so I think that's really important. It's a combined effort of sportsmen and a department, which you rarely see, coming together to make sure we have the best for our wildlife in the state.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Titus, so my question is, and I'm sorry if it's already in here, I've read it several times, so I don't know if I'm tired or just missed it. What if someone hits an animal or comes in contact with an animal? Is there a mechanism for them to get the permit afterwards, or you have to have it prior?
Well, you wouldn't have anticipatory run into an animal, so you don't have a permit in your car just in case you hit an animal. You're not, in my area, every morning when I drive in here, there's inevitably deer that I have to stop for. So you don't intentionally would have a permit anticipatory. What you would do is after, and that's where the regulation would have to be dealt with the Wildlife Commission on how is a law enforcement going to have those tags, and would be like an e-tag. We talk about e-tags now. Would it be just something which I see as a reasonable thing, is to have a digital copy that the police officer would have, because they're all digital now with their suits or their tickets or whatever. They'd have an ability to do a digital thing. Yes, I was notified. Yes, they hit this animal. It's been reported. Give you a tag so that you then can transport that. Because that was mentioned in Assembly in Senator Hansen's presentation regarding probable cause and being stopped. If you have a dead animal in your vehicle and you don't have a tag for that, I mean, it's against law.
Thank you. And sorry, I have never hit an animal before, so I was reading it as you have to have it prior. I'm like, how would you anticipate? So I just wanted to make sure that was correct. So that's why my question was silly, because I was like, how would you be able to anticipate that? So that makes more sense. Okay, perfect. Are you ready to go? Anyone other questions? Okay, perfect. If you would like to take a seat, and we will now hear testimony in support of Senate Bill 215. As a reminder, testimony is limited to 2 minutes. And please begin when you're ready.
Madam Chair, committee members, Larry Johnson, Coalition for Nevada's Wildlife. Make this quick. We're totally in support of this bill. Many other states have already have this on statute, and we should too. That's all. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Madam Chair, for the record, Greg Smith here on behalf of Great Basin Wildlife Conservancy. And we too would ditto the thoughts on that. It's a bill that's overdue and needs to happen. Thank you.
Okay, doesn't look like we have anyone in Las Vegas. So AVH, is there anyone on the line wishing to provide support for Senate Bill 215?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. We'll now hear testimony in opposition for Senate Bill 215. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to provide testimony in opposition for Senate Bill 215? Seeing none here in Las Vegas, we're going to move to our phone lines. AVH, is there anyone on the phone line wishing to provide opposition testimony to Senate Bill 215?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Lastly, we will take testimony in neutral. Is there anyone here in Carson City that would like to provide testimony in neutral for Senate Bill 215? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mike Scott, Deputy Director of Nevada Department of Wildlife. Just to kind of clarify some of the questions that were heard with respect to the mechanism for this disease is a prion or a prion. It's a protein, and so it can be passed from a dead animal into the ground and then picked up by another animal. So that's the mechanism for this. With respect to the way that we would envision how this would work is if somebody hit an animal and wanted to collect it, I spoke about e-tags earlier. There might be a way that we can connect that to a salvage permit where somebody could use their phone and actually salvage an animal that way, and it'd just be that easy on your phone, and you would basically have the ability to possess that animal and take it.
Thank you.
To answer any other questions.
How long does it take to get it back?
Mike Scott, for the record. Yeah.
Can you state that question and then answer too, so everybody can hear?
Senator Titus asked how long it takes to get it back. It depends on the time of year. What we try to do is we send these in batches. And so it's not an individual where we get one and we send it in. We tend to save them, freeze them, and send them off in a batch. So it can take weeks before we actually get a result back. So far, we have not had a positive in Nevada, but as Senator Titus pointed out, we do have it on the California border, and it's also present in Idaho and Utah. So it is possible that we'll see it sometime in the future, but to date, we haven't found it in Nevada.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully we can get some of those home testing kits, like our COVID tests. Go ahead, Senator Scheibel.
So I noticed that, I know that this is not, excuse me, I know this is not a money committee, but I noticed that you submitted a fiscal note of 0 on this, and I'm just wondering how it costs $35,000 to transfer a license between two people, but it costs $0 to implement a new licensing scheme.
Yeah, Mike Scott, for the record. So we don't know what this is going to cost to develop the salvage permit and then how many times this is going to be utilized. So at this point, it's an unknown to us how often it's going to be. We do have some vague records of how often this happens in Nevada. We get, Department of Public Safety collects some information on animals hit, Department of Transportation does, and Department of Wildlife does. And so there's some areas that we know that are hotspots where animals get hit through the state, but with respect to how often we would have to see one of these salvage permits be utilized, at this point, we don't know. And as far as the money goes, with you said 35,000, but I don't know where that number came from. So I'm not sure where you get that number.
That was your fiscal note on SB 235.
235. Oh.
That we just heard.
Okay, I understand. So, and if you want me to answer, Mike Scott, for the record, if you want me to answer with respect to 235, I can, but since we're not on that anymore, I don't know if you'd like me to do that or not.
It was for 215 though, the question
for two?
The question is for 215. How can this be a zero fiscal note? Like, we have agencies in here all the time who we have asked to implement new permits, new programs, new forms, new documents, new designations, new registrations, and they always have a number for us about how much it's going to cost to expand their computer system, update their software, add a new code. And so I'm just wondering how it is that the Department of Wildlife doesn't even have an estimate for how much it's going to cost to unless I'm misunderstanding, we already have such a thing as a salvage permit. You have no idea how much it's going to cost to implement a whole new permitting scheme.
Mike Scott for the record. Yes, we don't know how much this is going to be used. And I think we don't know if this is just going to be a Department of Wildlife issue or if there's going to be, the various sheriff's departments around the state are going to be required to create these salvage permits or use them as well. Because I mentioned the phone part of it, but this could just be a written permit that a highway patrolman could give you. So at this point, we don't know how this is going to be created. So I don't know how much it's going to cost.
Okay, so that actually is very helpful because I fundamentally misunderstood that this was supposed to be implemented by the Department of Wildlife, but now I understand that that the commission will adopt the regulations, but it could be enforced or administered by a whole different agency.
It's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Ellison.
Thank you, ma'am, for a second chance at this. Hey, only thing I've gotten, and if you could answer me this, it seemed like to me, like on I-80 or like the road to Lamoille or whatever, and you hit a deer, you want to be able to get that carcass out of there as soon as you can, because you're going to have other animals out along the road trying to eat at it or whatever. So then there are going to be more things that could be hit or run over on the road. So it seemed like to me there'd be some way to try to get that animal out of there right away, because you could have coyotes, lions, or whatever trying to eat the carcass. Is that right?
Mike Scott for the record. Yeah, I would say that there is a public safety element to this, and to remove those animals, not everybody has the ability on I-80 to go drag an animal off of the highway. It's probably not safe, so there's probably going to be some limitations on when it can be utilized. The other thing about it is that on I-80, where the speed limit is 80 miles an hour, there may not be a whole lot of that animal that's left that's to be consumed after it's hit by a vehicle going that fast.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Okay, AVH, is there anyone on the line wishing to provide testimony in neutral for Senate Bill 215? Maybe AVH forgot what portion of the agenda we were on, since we kind of hopped around. Okay. We will invite the sponsor back for any final remarks.
Senator Titus for the record, and thank you, Chair, and all members of this committee for hearing this bill. I think it's long overdue. And I just wanted to note that Paul Young, who is a member of the Wildlife Commission, was here but had to leave for another thing, and he was going to testify in support of this, because again, there is a lot of unknown to answer the cost, because we're going to put it in the Wildlife Commission to come up with regulations. This isn't going to happen soon. It could be a possibility of the permit, where literally a person could go on their phone, which we do now for our license. You could go on your phone and say, hey, I at this moment I hit this deer or hit whatever, and I'm going to salvage it. So it could be that simple. They could engage, as he mentioned, the assistant director mentioned, law enforcement, and then there might be some costs there. So they would there's variables on this wildlife, there's a lot of discussion that will happen. I note in the bill that they shall do it, however, not may do it, so that this will move forward. There's going to be time, lots of thoughtful discussion, and I'm sure somewhere along the line, this body has understood the makeup of the Wildlife Commission and then what their roles are and what their authorities. So they are the ones that set the regulations, and so they would be in charge of that with input from our Nevada Department of Wildlife in a cooperative manner. And we gave the Nevada Department of Wildlife a lot of authority within this bill to make sure that they are okay with what goes forward from this on, again, for disease mitigation, disease understanding, safety, and as was mentioned, and it's gruesome. I know many of you on the committee are not hunters. It is a gruesome thought to think that we're even doing this, and the fact that there may not be a lot of meat left on Highway 80 when you hit an animal. And all these are in factor, but if you think about my rural area, we're in Smith Valley, we see literally every day an animal is killed alongside of an alfalfa field or something like that. That animal is what we have in mind, and they're going to take all that in consideration. Public safety would be the number one thing that has to happen, is public safety. So there's a lot of discussion that's going to happen after this, but this long time coming for our state to move forward, at least, address the issue, bring it forward with lots of thoughtful discussion. And I think that's where this bill differs than what I've put forward before with Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod, giving it into the thoughtful discussion of the Wildlife Commission, that what works for Nevada, using all the data that we have from other states. So thank you very much for hearing the bill.
Thank you so much, and I just wanted to update everyone that AVH said there was no one on the line. So there was no one else on the line to give neutral, so thank you so much. We are now going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 215, and we're ready to begin our final item, which is public comment. Our final business is public comment. Please remember, public comment is limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone here in person that would like to provide public comment in Carson City? Seeing none, we lost Las Vegas and AVH, so there's no one on the line. So we are going, seeing that there's no public comment, this concludes our meeting. Remember, on Thursday, that meeting is canceled. So we'll be meeting on Tuesday, March 18th. And this meeting is adjourned. I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry I rambled.